Well, hello everyone. Here to show you right here, talk about for caller ID right here, and most of the time it sure seems that way that when we're thinking about a caller ID that we could be thinking about is like the person calling in on the other side, and also understanding just a little bit about how that works and all that. But still but you see right here are these dialing the touch tone keypad right here, and a lot of times if you made any recent phone calls, within certain time periods, and let's just say if it's maybe been a year since you used this or something like that, and then a lot of times that you would notice that you would notice about yeah, if there's any number saved in your phone directory or any other phone calls that you gotta place and all, but still. But if we all see this right here, though, that it actually shows right here. I'm like, you have right here the telephone keypad right here, and most of the time, though, that if you're going to be using the mobile app, though, that you would be using that, if most of us are familiar with like Hangouts, and if we're familiar with Skype, and if we're familiar with other apps, and then other desktop apps, and place for certain phone calls, but still place certain phone calls, and then people if they're going to be looking at your application, if you're going to be applying for a job, and most of the time they're going to be asking you to, where if you would mind, go ahead, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and call me at this number so we can talk about this more, something like that. And so a lot of times it sure seems that way that somebody's going to say that go ahead and call me at this number here, so that way we can discuss the job opportunity, or about to get a better understanding about what your question is, or if it's anything on the cover letter or anything like that. But a lot of times it's like, yeah, 12 digits long, especially, and so that's why that that you have right here I talk about for the phone numbers. And so yeah, that most of the time, like on if there's a Facebook, like yeah, especially on speed dialer, and also if most of us are familiar with all those other apps like Hangouts, or if it's maybe I don't know about Snapchat, other apps and accounts that you might be familiar with, but still they're talking about right here about phone numbers. And so if that person, if you don't have anybody in your contacts list, based on what yeah, if you're trying to contact somebody, even contact tech support about something, then most of the time you're probably thinking too is to where, yeah, well, what's the number? And so yeah, that compared to this right here, compared to maybe like anybody say that if you were to be trying to call somebody, then most of the time that yeah, well, you go ahead, I'm like, yeah, especially by email too. By email, if you go and click on the email, and like extensions, phone extensions, and so most of the time phone extensions are usually the phone extensions that are placed whenever you do if you're trying to return a phone call, or if you're trying to place a phone call, to trying to reach somebody. And phone extensions are usually direct numbers that go directly to their offices. So in case of anybody that gets any voice messages, or if you get any emails that show what the extension is, and that's usually what that is. But still, but talk about right here, you have right here is the dial keypad right here. Now I'm sure most of us are familiar with this right here. That if you were to dial a telephone number by keypad right here, especially if it's not saved in your directory. And you're probably thinking too that yeah, well, if it's not saved in your directory, then of course you could also look it up too. But still, that compared to analog, and compared to dialing a number now, and a lot of times everybody else might even say that well, really, you don't really even dial the number too much. You mainly have these video conversations with anybody that you want to connect to, especially if it's in a conference meeting, that you don't really have to deal with the telephone number. And so a lot of times that yeah, even if you're chatting live with an agent or through an insurance company or anything like that you would actually be a chat you would be able to talk to somebody just by writing to them and talking to them if you got a question for them or anything like that. So it sure seems that way that this is kind of like the optional setting right here, but like everybody else will probably say too that back whenever I was in back whenever I was in the fourth grade actually that it sure seems that way that it was kind of kind of not really, but every time you picked up the phone, no, it seems like almost all the time that I was trying to remember what the telephone number was. I'm like, yeah, well, what's your home phone number, or what's the cell phone number, or something like that. And a lot of times it sure seemed that way that you had to look very carefully at the numbers, and sometimes that you even got the numbers reversed too. You got the numbers reversed, so if you were to try to dial a phone number and then you were trying to dial it right, and that's why it sure seems that way that especially like with the area code, you got the 1 and then the 0. So you have right here this dial pad right here, but it's like then most of the time though that you got the star, and then of course you got the pound key right there if you want to check your voice messages. And so it's like, yeah, that whenever you look at this right here, and first of all, somebody's going to maybe say is to where that, how do you stand dealing with all those steps, to where to compare to nowadays that we have this video calling system to where you can just, dial, you can just select that person's name as long as they're saved on your contacts list, and you can go ahead and just select their name, and it goes ahead, and then all you gotta do is just connect with them, and then you have like a source of set the profile ID and all that, and that's really all what you gotta do. So if you're trying to contact tech support, or you call any number, if it's maybe an 800 number or something like that, then yeah, like I say that you can go ahead and you have that option to where you can go ahead and call landlines like that. But the way I think about it too, though, that the first thing that sometimes comes to my mind though is that, yeah, well, really, what's the number? Like, and you try to remember what the telephone number was, but still, I'm just telling everybody here too that if we all kind of miss those days to where most of the time it's like if you're trying to get a hold of somebody that if you're trying to call somebody, then you can just select their name from the contacts list, and then you can just dial their number, connect with them, that way. But still, that talk about right here, that for the phone numbers right here, you got the 1 and the 2 right here, and then the 0, and so everybody else told me, told me before too that these right here, you have the alphabetical numbers right here on the ABC, and then the A B C D E F G. So a lot of these numbers right here will be in alphabetical order right here. And so let's just say that if you're trying to order something, or maybe just checking the weather or anything like that a lot you would have letters and numbers on a dial keypad, right? And so that's why that you're probably thinking too that, okay, if you had to, especially if you're making a phone call, maybe from not from a payphone, but like if you're at a motel, or maybe if you're at maybe a holiday suite or something like that. I'm like, yeah, if you're staying somewhere and you want to know too that if you're trying to use the telephone service there, then they might have it to where that you have to dial a 3 first and then the area code just to be able to dial all the area or somewhere like that. But talk about here the pound and the star and the pound key right here. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, if you're trying to, I'm like, yeah, if you're trying to, I'm like, yeah, contact, operator, or if it's anything such as to where if you're trying to check, check the weather, or if there's another way of how to be able to check, the news forecast. I'm like, sports updates or something like that. Check the sports updates or anything like that. But still, that you have these keys right here. And you had the time you were thinking too, is toward it that as somebody were to ask you toward it, if you want to make a phone call, and even if it is somebody who's out of state, or maybe yeah, if they're within about 100 miles away or something like that, and the first thing that really comes to my mind is toward yeah, well, you know if you can go ahead and call, make a phone call though, and anybody say if you can kind of get some basic training on how to do that, and people say, yeah, well, if you could get any sorts of basic training, and like say, yeah, you would maybe try to look up a number, just to see, okay, yeah, what the number is, or if you can find that person, and just to say hi or something like that, but a lot of times though, it sure seems that way that whenever you're going to be applying for a job, or if you're going to be taught, I'm like, yeah, if you're going to be connecting somehow with somebody, and they're going to maybe say that to where I prefer to talk over the phone about that, and let's just say that if the situation goes by as to where that while you were working on something, and then you were actually you had the Skype app opened up for that reason. You had it open up just because that you were checking to make sure that everything was all working correctly, testing the equipment, testing the settings on there, and just making sure that everything was working right. And it's possible that somebody might even say that well, really, right now, you don't really know, if it's if you can receive incoming calls on that or not on the app, and so in order to be able to receive any incoming calls, and of course getting the Skype credit too. But it's like, yeah, the first of all, it's like, if you were trying to remember what the number is. So a lot of times it's like, well, really, that whenever you do, if you're trying to make a phone call, if you're trying to call somebody using Skype, though, that we can all think about too, is toward that if we're talking about maybe from a landline, that it's, they say that, well, really, if you don't have no Skype credit, but then also that if the person that you're getting, that you're contacting that if they got a little bit of Skype credit, and then yeah. So in case of anybody that may want to know too, that if you do try to dial the number, and let's just say if it does connect, and then they'll say is toward that, well, really, that even if the credit that does say zero, but still that really it all really depends on what plan that you got, right? But I just really think too that whenever you comes to credit, though, I guess a lot of that Sky credit is mainly used for, like, if you want to just to just kind of get some practice with, or if anything, if you want to talk at your own personal private time or anything like that, if you're trying to just talk to somebody, so that way you could get a better understanding about how how it works, anything like that, anything that you want to talk about, really. But still, but I just mainly want to show everybody here that this keypad, because I know almost all of us will probably say too that if you're trying to make a phone call, a lot of times it's like you try to remember what the phone number is, and so say you can look up what the number is too if it's saved in your directory, and also that any recently now dialed numbers or anything like that, if it's yeah, emergency service lines, or any number that you do want to dial, and anything any other phone calls, but still that but the way I think about it too, though, you got right here is the star and the pound, and so let's just say if you're checking the voicemail right here, but still, what does that usually mean whenever if somebody is trying to tell you that I'm like, yeah, I would like to have a conversation with you over the phone about what's been going on with the work that you do, and then also well, Mike, but still that they'll say is toward yeah, well, you can go ahead and call, and then and some places might even say that you can call, you can go ahead and call me, and talk personally. Here's my personal number right here. So it's like, yeah, so it all kind of starts as toward that if you were to talk to somebody, though, it's like, are they willing to give you, their personal, contact number, just so that way you can talk, or just to kind of get to know the work that you do, or just to get a better understanding. I say, yeah, it can really be all the above, really. But I just really think too that yeah, if you're trying to talk to somebody, over the phone about something. And a lot of times it sure seems that way that, if you read on my letter, the letter that I was telling you that about, what comes to my mind or, the things for what I'm thinking about, et cetera, et cetera. But on the other hand, too, though, that there's like most of the time employers are looking for, a good callback number and a good time and day that they can call you. So let's just say that if you're trying to, usually between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., something like that. And like everybody else will probably say too, if they're going to be in and out of the office, playing phone tag, whichever it is. But, either way, that like jobs will probably say too that well we prefer to be able to talk over the phone about this, so that way that I'm like, yeah, good to hear your voice. A lot of people would say that whenever you do talk over the phone, that most of the time, yeah, most of the time whenever you do get a call back, that's usually how it is. When people call you back about something that it makes you feel more proud, more proud, just knowing that compared to actually looking at the keypad right there and like so figuring out, oh, I still, I can't really figure this out, or yeah, I can figure it out, but still, it's I'll just look at it later on, but still, if you were to receive a call back from somebody, and like everybody else will probably say too, that that's really about how it kind of all starts, is toward it. Yeah, whenever the person calls you back, so that way you'll be able to talk about something. And usually, most of the time, though, that whenever you do, if you do try to call a number, maybe if you can't remember what the number is, and you try looking up the number, maybe in a phone directory or something like that, but still. But talk up over here with the telephone numbers right here. That if we can, if we all know that looking at the telephone number right here, that it's like looking at that, and you're probably thinking is toward it that you compared to the analog and all that, that the first thing that's really going to come to your mind, especially, is toward the yeah, well, you dial the zero, and then maybe it's going to, I'm like, yeah, connected to the operator and all, the star and the pound. So most of the time, if you're trying to check, yeah, direct lines and direct extensions, and so you maybe want to know too that a lot of things back in the earlier days, to where if you were to pick up the telephone and dial a certain extension, and then that you would be able to check and hear the radio forecast, or maybe the sports updated or something like that, and so it's like, yeah, a lot of things that you can do with the phone, just by pick up the phone, right? Marketing, ads or anything like that, ordering a pizza or anything like that, but still. But on the other hand, too, that if somebody were to say that if you were to have a conversation with somebody, and let's just say if it's over a love letter, or if it's at dinner for Sunday, Sunday afternoon, go to a graduation, wedding, dinner, whichever the situation could be, and that's why you're probably thinking too, is to where you're trying to remember what the number is, and so that's why that probably thinking too, yeah, well, why do you think that people would much rather have a phone conversation with you rather than to just be reading pages and pages of documents, maybe 4 pages of documents for whatever that you want to talk about, so far as anything that comes to your mind, so far as anything that you wrote in a journal, or any on a rough draft or an outline or anything like that, no notepad or anything, and but a lot of times, I guess the answer really is toward that, yeah, well, that voice is not the same as compared to actually hearing the person's voice over the telephone. And then also that it's also about is toward if you're able to talk to somebody, talk to somebody over the telephone about something. And, what's one thing, I guess, to remember about that is toward the, yeah, well, really, that, a lot of managers would probably prefer to talk over the phone about a lot of that stuff, and number one, I guess, so that way they can get a good understanding about what the letter was about, and then anything, yeah, regarding to your taxes or anything that's regarding to any important documents, or anything like that. But I just really think too that most of the time, know that if you're getting a call back from somebody about something, and let's just say that if it's something about something important, and you may not answer right away because it's going to show restricted, or it's going to maybe show something like unknown, unavailable, or unknown, on the phone. So a lot of times it's like yeah. So I'm like that like anybody say that really makes me nervous too. That whenever I do receive any calls that I don't recognize. So what's the best way of how to describe for a caller ID? And like everybody else would probably say, yeah, it goes straight directly to voicemail, and that's usually what happens. Is that yeah, it goes straight directly to voicemail. But like everybody else would probably say too that the best way of how to solve that also is toward that any phone line that you're going to be familiar with, right? That if you do receive any incoming calls, and like I say, is to where, yeah, well, really, that the best way of how to solve that, of course, too, is to, like everybody else might say, that to where it's okay to answer the call too, if you think that if you know who it possibly could be, or maybe that it could also, like, yeah, a sales call, or like, yeah, scam, or it could also be the wrong number. Sometimes it happens too. It could be a wrong number too. So that's why it sure seems that way. That talk about for caller ID, and so a lot of times, yeah, we probably thinking too that why don't they have a better caller ID system installed on a lot of these apps? Because I know with me though that whenever I do receive an incoming call, or any call that I don't recognize, and most of the time it's the app, it goes, you send it to the voicemail, or if anything, you just declined, you don't accept the call, and it, say it goes to the voicemail, or if anything, the calls disconnected, or something like that. But still, the best way of how to solve that, of course, is that yeah, just knowing that if you're going to be receiving any incoming calls, and like everybody else will probably say too, yeah, well, that best way of knowing about it is to where, yeah, making sure if you do send it directly to voicemail, and just making sure that if your voicemail is set correctly to where any calls that you do wind up missing, or if you can't answer within certain times, I guess to say that's what voicemail is for. And half the time you want to know too that if they're going to have it toward it, yeah, extended absence greetings, and also, that, certain voicemail box options that allow to where certain phone calls, the ones, okay, which ones are real important, and which ones that are, just for marketing calls or anything. So yeah, like if you have a premium account, and also if you have any source of business account, that we would be familiar with a lot of that stuff, and so that's why it sure seems that way. Whenever it comes to caller ID, and call forwarding and messaging and all that, and that's why it's like, yeah, if you're going to be using a telephone node, that really, like everybody else would say too, that the things that we can learn about besides the telephone keypad right here. You have right here is a 4 or 5, and the 8, and the 9, and like the 8, and then the 0 right there, and so yeah, that the star and the pound right there. But I just really think though that whenever it comes to working on an application or any source of document, though, it's like, yeah, that, you put a return on there, and that return's going to include an email address, but most of the time, what I usually see on there is telephone numbers. And I know, like, if you're going to be putting in if you're going to be submitting an application to a company to apply for a job, that it sure seems that way that, yeah, it's going to ask you to make sure that, if you do receive a phone call or a text message, from that company indicating that, we received your application, we would like to, like to talk to you so we can talk about the details, something like that. And but a lot of times I just really think too that if you prefer to talk over email, or if anything, to just by text message or anything like that. But you have right here, I talk about with Skype right here, and so it's like, whenever if you're going to be calling any source of extension, anybody calling anybody, and let's just say if it's, the insurance company, that the first thing that really comes to my mind is going to be is toward, okay, what's the number? If you remember the area code. And so you got to dial a 1 or 0 first just to be able to dial out of the area, and also the area code. Zip code and, the area code. And so a lot of times, though, it's like, area codes, those area codes are basically like if you're trying to call out of the area, then there will be a code that you would enter, just before you can dial the rest of the number. But still, but if we're talking about like overseas calls, or if it's international calls or any calls like that, we're talking about maybe up to 17 digits. That we're talking about up to 17. Maybe hopefully it's not up to 20 digits, that you got to dial just to be able to call internationally. And so it's like, well, most of the time it's usually a 1-800 number. For the most part, it's usually a 1-800 number that you got to dial, just to be able to reach, customer service, or if it's tech support, or for technical support, or the local operator. And so that's why that we're probably thinking too is toward that, first of all, if it's been a while since you used the dial pad, and you're probably thinking too, well, what the number is. And but different ways of how we can think about the telephone touch keypad right here. But most of the time, that if we were to be trying to make a video call, like using Skype, or using the Hangouts, or using maybe Instagram, or on Snapchat, that most of the time, that in order to be able to make the phone call, it's over a return, to where somebody calls you and you go ahead and try calling them back. And so it's like, sometimes it's kind of like a back and forth connection, if you want to kind of look at that. It's back and forth, to where they call you back, they call you and then you call them. Phone tag. Everybody else might even say, and maybe would agree, that phone tag. How whenever you say phone tag, what does that usually mean? Well, whoever that gets to the telephone first, that's what you call phone tag. Or no, that well, what that usually means is toward it that you go ahead and call that person and they call you back, and then if you keep missing each other's calls, make sure that you're on standby, and you wait for that phone call, wait for that person to call you back. And but a lot of times you probably say that, well, really, why would you want to do that if you could maybe have like a radio conversation, like a walkie-talkie, where you can actually you can go ahead and just talk over chat. Why would you want to do phone tag, or why would you want to count on your phone to be able to have to call that person back in case if you miss their call, then they call you back, and you might they might miss your call, and then they want to call you back, and so that's another way of how you want to describe phone tag. But it sure seems that way, that when we think about phone conversations, though, it's like, phone tag, though, that whoever that can get to the telephone first, or if it's really about, whoever that answers the call, or if we're both connected. And everybody else might say, no, it's over the fact about that, two lines have to be connected at the same time, for it to not be considered, it's not phone tag. Two lines need to be connected in order for the connection to work. Two lines have to be connected, just for to be able to the place, just to be able to, for the connection to work. And 2 or 3 lines, or maybe if you're going to be on three-way. Everybody else might say that, getting three-way conversations, and getting on three-way or maybe four-way conversations, you get you work that out where you can connect to maybe 4 other people, and you're trying to get that 4 other people connected. And all you gotta do is just dial their number and you'll be able to connect with them. So that's why it sure seems that way. That way we think about though is like you go ahead and if you know what the telephone number is and you can go and dial it. But I just really think too that you have conversations with somebody and you're like, yeah, well, that it seems like to me that you want to talk more about for what comes to your mind that compared to writing it down on paper and compared to maybe typing it on a document. And most of the time, like everybody else will probably say too, that with the document though, what you are basically doing is to where you're sending it electronically, but still anybody who wants a copy of something, and most of the time that like drafting if you're creating an outline or anything like that, but still, which would you rather prefer though? Like anybody say, well, really, that if you're trying to apply for a job, then most of the time it's like, yeah, well, if you can, talk over the phone, or if you're trying to understand, what that person is talking about. But the way I think about it too, though, that yeah, people are willing to give you the number to their offices if if you reach out to them and you go ahead and ask a question or two, and then that's usually how it starts, is to where you reach out to them and you have a question or two, and they're like, well, yeah, well, here's my office, my direct line to my office here. Go ahead and call me there, and I'll be able to explain a little bit more about that. I'll go and explain the details a little bit further about that, and so that way we can go and talk about that. And so that's why that I'm likely want to know too that whenever you do check out job ads and also applications, or maybe go to these business websites and you see the telephone numbers there, and call toll free. Call toll free at this number, and so it's like whenever you do connect to a representative, and the first thing I know it. Whenever you receive an incoming call, why does that make you so nervous? Whenever you do you receive a call, I'm like, whenever you have an incoming call coming in, why does that make you so nervous? Much of the time, I'm like, well, really, that if you prefer, if you're trying to get somewhere, and like everybody else will probably say too, that most of the time it's over the fact about that, you don't know if they're going to hire you yet. It's all about what you call the waiting situation. Whenever you do apply for a job, that the first thing that's going to come to your mind is toward that, if you've done this before, or, no, if you don't think that, you don't know if they're gonna like, they don't think that you're gonna be qualified for the job or anything else that comes to your mind, right? But the way I think about it too, I'm like, yeah, especially if a doctor were to be trying to call you back, then you know for sure that it may not come up with the number that you recognize. So that's why, I think it's also important to wear that, type of caller ID though, to wear that, if somebody were to be trying to contact you, and let's just say that if they're going to be using, I'm like, yeah, phone number, but like everybody else would probably say too, yeah, it goes the voicemail mainly, but still that ways of how you want to describe for caller ID as to where well, if there's a callback number or anything like that, but everybody else might even say that that for the most part though that on your account that it's a good idea to check your profile and check your resume, just to make sure that check your account to make sure that everything is all working correctly, all updated, because like everybody else might even say too that you mainly got the phone so that way you can stay posted with what goes on, and also that so that way I'm like, yeah, if you're just checking out about how this works, so get some practice with it, whichever but still that if we're talking about any important calls, urgent calls or anything like that, I think that's also important to know about, is toward that, the certain steps, still to take. But still, but if we're talking about like, yeah, for incoming calls, but let's just say the last time I used this right here was just so that way I can get familiar with like if I were to be dialing the number and making a phone call, right? But let's just say that people might even say too that if you don't know how to answer the calls, if they come in through the Skype app, or if they come in off of the dialer or any other sorts of landline that you use, and or if anything that for any reason at all, that if try to recognize it. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that that if you do receive an incoming call and say, yeah, well, if anything, to make sure that your voicemail is set to where that you'll be able to answer any calls or extended absence greeting. If you can't come to the phone right away, and it goes directly to voicemail. And so that's, I guess that's usually how other people think about that, to where it's voicemail. But then also there's another way. Like on your phone, know that there's a way that you can, which I know it's Magic Jack, Magic Jack that does that, to where that you can save but which I would think on the account that you would be able to set that to where that extended absence folder. If you were to create a folder in any recordings that you do that you do receive on that phone on your account, and then that you'll go directly to a number at your desired preference. And let's just say if one of them could be what you call friends and invitations or something like that, or maybe reunions or something like that. So yeah, so a lot of things that come to your mind, especially, but still. But looking at the telephone keypad right here, though, it's like, yeah, that you go ahead and dial the number on there, and you know how that is that you dial a number, and then maybe you're able to look up if that person's in your contacts list, and also if you want to dial a star or a pound right there, just to be able to give you more options right there. But okay, you'll look up a number, or if you're trying to reach somebody, and maybe if you're trying to figure out about how to save that in your directory or something like that on your account. And so that's just a thing, though, that about knowing about how the phone systems and everything all work. But a lot of times it's like, yeah, that what's the number? What's the number, and how do I, but still, yeah, I could probably tell everybody too that that yeah, you dial you dial a zero, and like, but still. But the way I think about it too, though, that really that whenever you do place phone calls now, it seems like most of the time it's either over Messenger, or it's on the Hangouts, or it's on over Zoom, or some line like that. And you're probably thinking too is toward that you don't even have to dial the number too much just to be able to connect. All you gotta do is just making sure that at that connection, that person is on your contacts, and you'll be able to reach them that way. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that if you're filling out a survey, even if you're filling out a survey, that usually a scale between 1 and 8, or 1 and 7, and also 1 and 9, or something like that. But anyway, talk up over here of like talk about the telephone. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.